All right, everyone, let's get started. Thanks for tuning in today. I am excited for today's webinar. We've got a special guest with us, Dave, and today we will be talking about full site editing with WordPress, how to get the most out of the full site editor and how to kind of navigate some of the trickier parts of that. So excited to have you join us today. And let's just start diving right into it. Let's see if I can get to the next slide. By way of introductions, we have with us a special guest, Dave Ryan. Aside from being a personal friend, he's also a senior product manager here at Bluehost. He works on our WordPress project and has been a contributor in the WordPress community for years. He's been an organizer at a number of WordCamps and is on the organizing team for this year's WordCamp US. So very close to the WordPress project and the WordPress community. Awesome resource. I'm super excited to have him join us today. And myself, I am Devin. I am your host. I'm the Senior Field Marketing Manager here at Bluehost. And today, well, before we get into today's topic, let's go over a couple of housekeeping items. First things first, in your navigation or in your dashboard, go ahead and find the question box and open that if you'd like. Drop an emoji if you can hear us, or better yet, if you have any specific questions that you're hoping are answered in today's webinar about full site editing, go ahead and drop those in the question box now. We want to make sure that we are touching on all the points that you are interested in hearing. We try to make this as engaging as an educational experience in a webinar as possible. So we really appreciate any participation to help us know how we can best help you. So with that, oh, one other thing, if you have any issues okay, awesome. Someone said I cannot hear you, but I also have a lot of emojis. I'm going to say that I suspect that initial question was from the very beginning when we could not hear, but it brings up a good point. If you can't hear or if you're having any issues with the webinar, I would try exiting the webinar and coming back in. That usually fixes things. If not, you need to reach out to the GoToWebinar help desk. Sadly, because it's a third-party platform, there's not a whole lot that we can do to troubleshoot any issues you might be having, but they should be able to help you get through whatever problems you might be having. A couple questions that we get every webinar. Yes, this will be recorded. We should send out the recording in the next 24 to 48 hours. So we should be sending this over to you. So if you need to drop early for whatever reason, then you'll still get a copy of this. And we always upload our webinars to the Bluehost YouTube channel. So if you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe to that, and you can follow all the new webinars that we post for that. So that's all we have for housekeeping. And if that's the situation, I'm going to turn the time over to Dave. While Dave is going through the content he's prepared today, I'm going to be off screen. I'm going to turn my camera off so you're not distracted by me staring at my other screen. And I'm going to be trying to answering all the questions that are coming in. We will save some time at the end for a Q&A. So if you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer them. If I don't know the answer, then I'll let you know that we'll save that question for Dave at the Q&A section. So Dave, thank you so much for joining us. Super excited to have you. Take it away.
Thank you, Devin. Well, hello, everyone. Good morning or good evening, no matter where you're joining us from. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Dave Ryan. I am a senior product manager here at Bluehost. And a lot of my job is working on some of our WordPress experiences and trying to take advantage of some of the new tools and features that I'll be showing you today. So today we're going to be talking about WordPress full site editing. And if you're not entirely sure what that means quite yet, don't worry, we're going to get into all of this. We're going to start talking about WordPress blocks. And if you don't know what those are, that's totally fine too. So we're going to talk a little bit about WordPress blocks, how we use them to assemble a website and assemble website content. We'll talk through some best practices, some tips and tricks on how to use blocks effectively. And once we have that sort of foundational knowledge, we'll start taking a look at this new concept WordPress has of full site editing, where edge to edge, from the top of the browser to the bottom, that you'll be able to interact with and customize your site a lot closer to your vision than you've been able to historically with what we would call a classic WordPress theme. So I'm going to be spending most of today doing a live demo. Again, if you have any questions as we go, please try to drop them in that questions box or in the chat. Devin will try to address those. I will do my best to try to glance over at those. But if we don't answer your question in the moment, please make sure to get it in there and we'll circle back and do that afterwards. So I am going to hop out of our deck and start taking a look at WordPress blocks. So here I am on my Bluehost dashboard inside of WordPress. So if I wanted to start working in WordPress blocks, I would see those when I go into my posts or my pages inside of WordPress. I'll just kick up this size a little bit so we can see that a little better. So here on my left-hand sidebar, I have my posts area and my pages area. Right now, I'm going to go ahead and just say add a new page to WordPress. So you'll notice that the rest of the WordPress admin has disappeared. If you've used WordPress in the past and you're wondering where the WordPress admin went, there is this feature that is now the default called full screen mode. So you can spend more time focusing on the content of what you're working on. If I wanted to get back to that dashboard, I would click this WordPress logo here in the upper left corner. And I can also get out of full screen mode, and you can see that I'm still inside the WordPress admin. So I'm going to go back into full screen, but if you're wondering where WordPress went, that's what we're looking at today. So this is what we call the block editor in WordPress. And to understand the block editor, we have to have a concept of what blocks are. So blocks are an idea in WordPress. They're sort of like a shrink wrap around your content. Instead of working in lines or chapters, in WordPress, we often work in blocks and inner blocks. So what do I mean by that? When I'm normally working in any kind of text editor, whether that's Google Docs or Microsoft Word or WordPress, historically, as I type, I'm working on a line. And when I hit return on my keyboard, I would get a new line. But in WordPress, that's actually going to give me one paragraph block and then a new empty paragraph block to work in. So I'm going to open, the first thing I'm going to open up here is this list view in WordPress. And that's going to show me that as I type and write content and hit return, that WordPress keeps stacking these paragraph blocks on top of each other. So in addition to paragraphs, there's lots of other blocks that come with WordPress that I can use to assemble content in my site. So I would find those up here on the top of the WordPress editor. There are three sort of main primary zones in the WordPress editor we're going to look at today. So this first one is called the editor toolbar. So here in my editor toolbar, I have this plus button. Here's where I will go to get more blocks from within WordPress. It's also where I have some publishing controls where I can save my content as a draft, where I could preview my content or publish it. And then I have this settings sidebar gear that I can open and close to further refine the content I'm working on. I also have this main menu here, and you saw me use this a moment ago to turn on and off that full screen mode. And there's a few other settings in here. There's access to some other WordPress plugins. I have the Jetpack plugin installed right now. So a lot of things in the block editor, you will start by working from this editor toolbar. The next sort of main zone in the editor where I was starting to work here right now, this is my content area. This is sort of my canvas to start working on my document, assembling my paragraphs, or if I have rich media or other interactive features like a contact form, or maybe I'm using WooCommerce to sell products, I would work in blocks here in my content area. And then the last major area of the editor is this settings sidebar here. So while I work on a block, I'm in the block sidebar. But if I click into my title here, you'll notice that this tab slides over and it says I'm now working on my page level settings. So there are some settings in here that apply to my entire document. And then as I work on pieces or blocks of my document, I see those in the block sidebar. So I have my editor toolbar across the top. I have my content area in the center. And then on my right side, I have that block and page toolbar that I work with that changes context as I change context. So I said that there was more than paragraphs here. So I'm going to open up this, what we call the block inserter here. And here's where I can see a menu of all of the blocks that are available to me on this site. As you install WordPress plugins and themes, you might notice that some of the blocks available change. And you'll notice that if you work in this editor, as I hover over these pieces, I actually get a preview of what that block might look like with some content in it. But it's actually using my site's design details, my colors, my fonts to create that preview. So if you are working on 2 different WordPress sites, or you have a WordPress site and you have a friend who has one, you'll see that these previews look a little different. And that's because they're trying to skin themselves to your current website's design. So I have paragraph blocks here. I have a heading block, which is really great for introducing a subtopic and writing more on that subtopic. And in here, I have some basic text blocks. I have some media related blocks. So I have an image block. I have a gallery block that lets me assemble a bunch of images to display together. There's an audio block. There's this cover block that's one of my favorites. And it's sort of, it's called a cover block because it's meant to sort of be like a CD album or a record album cover. So when I click this, I can either pick some media from my media library, or I can give it a color background here, and then I can write text on top of it. But it's called a cover because if I were to add some media here from my media library and insert it into my site, then it superimposes the text on top. So those are cover blocks. In media, I also have a file block with a simple download button. I have an image comparison that will let me show sort of a cool before and after, which can be really cool if you're trying to show, maybe you, painted a house or something, you wanted to show the before and after. There's also just some general design pieces here. So I have a buttons block. I have a pretty simple way to add some columns side by side in my site. I have a way to group blocks together, and we'll talk about why we might want to group some blocks together in a little bit. I have a little spacer block where if I just need a little bit of space in between something, I can come here and add my spacer block and just drag it around and really sort of fine tune visually that space that I might need in between 2 items. So we got text, we have media, we have some design layouts. I also have some widgets. So blocks can be not just sort of the design of how content looks, but it can also be dynamic content. So we have these static design and text blocks, but we also have these dynamic blocks. And these widgets will pull in the categories on my site. They'll let me pull in a search box that someone could use to search my website. Letting me add some social icons, a list of all my pages. And as I add pages to my site, these blocks will dynamically update to reflect that new data that I've added. Then we have some theme blocks here, and I'm not going to go too deep into these because these are really sort of the key part of full site editing that we're going to talk about in the second half of this webinar. I also have finally some embed blocks, and these are a great way to embed a YouTube video, bring in a Spotify playlist, maybe show a tweet within an article, and there's a bunch of services baked in here out of the box. And then I have Jetpack installed here, so I can bring in even more things, like I could bring a map in, a Google Calendar. And the idea behind all these blocks is that when I add them to my document, that I get visual controls to update them, so I can add really complex functionality to my site without needing to write some code. So those are the sort of basics of blocks. But before we get too deep into full site editing, I want to make sure we have a few concepts sort of nailed down. So you'll notice that as I work on blocks, that I have this toolbar that changes. And when I work on a paragraph block, I get slightly different controls than when I look at a heading block or when I work on a cover block. So this is called so I have my editor toolbar here up at the top of my screen. But as I work on a block, I also have this block toolbar. So in a heading, I might need to change the heading level. These are important for your search engine optimization on your site. And so if you're ever trying to work on your SEO, you might spend some time in this heading menu, making sure that you only have one H1 on your page and then maybe H2s, H3s. You rarely get down to these H5 through H6, but this is where I would start to go to start modifying some of the not just design or layout properties of this block, but also functionally what it's doing under the hood. Here I can also center this. I can make this text bold. I can make part of it italic. I can add a link here, and this is really handy. So I have some pages on here, and if I start typing, it will actually start finding posts and pages on my site, but I could also use this for an external link like bluehost.com, hit enter to add this link, and now this heading is a link off to bluehost.com. If I wanted to remove a link, I could come here and click that link again, and it would remove the link. So there's a few other options in here. You can highlight things. You can make things superscript and subscript as needed. So this block toolbar is really where I go to modify the contents of this block. And then this settings sidebar where I'm working in the block sidebar, here's where I start to get more advanced options than what I get in the toolbar. So if I need to change the text color, I can change it to one of the other colors within my theme. I can give this a background here and give it a nice sort of branded look that fits like the rest of my site. I can change the text size. And something kind of important to note is that historically, sometimes we have changed our heading size to control our text size. And you can actually control these two separately now, which is really handy if you're trying to display something large, but it shouldn't be one of the larger H tags. If you don't know much about that, that's fine, but that's one of the sort of handy pieces that we get here. I can add in these typography controls. I can always go in and I can set a custom font size. So if this is just too small and this is too large, I need something in between. I can tweak this and find the exact size that works well for my site and my content that I've typed in here. A few other tools in here, you can make the text thin or bold, you can make it italic, you can use these letter casing tools to force something uppercase or lowercase. So you may not need all of these tools all the time, but definitely check out some of these controls in your block sidebar. I'd also recommend taking a look at these dimensions. We'll probably take a little bit of a further look at this later if we have time, but you can use these to add additional space or margin around content. So if I add 50 pixels here, you'll see that the spacing on the top there just changed. And if I add 1,000 pixels here on the bottom, you'll see that it adds a bunch of space. So if you're ever trying to adjust space, you want to go to your dimensions panel and use either your margin or your padding controls. So that's a sort of quick look at the block editor. Now, before we start getting into full site editing, I really want to hammer home that there's a lot of sort of tips and tricks you can do as you work in this interface that make life a lot easier in your sort of day-to-day workflow. So some of those that I wanted to highlight right now, I'm going to go here and open up some demos that I prepared for this little spot. So imagine I have a blog where I write about coffee shops in the United States, and I have identified all of the top 50 coffee shops or cupcake or sweet shops in the United States in 2022. So I have this blog post that I'm working on, but as I'm working on this, as I start getting further down, maybe not in Alabama or Alaska or Arizona, if I'm maybe working on Michigan and I don't want to have to scroll through this really long document and find where Michigan is, here's where some of the other controls in my editor toolbar really help make it easy to work on a large block document like this. So I'm going to open up what's called the details here. And it's just this info button here. It will give me some stats about this document that I have about 35,000 characters. I have about 5,000 words, so it's a pretty long blog post, probably longer than you would want to do. I have 300 headings, and it tells me about some of the other details, how many blocks, paragraphs I have. But it has this great document outline. So if I was looking for Michigan, it is much easier for me to scroll through this details panel and find Michigan. And if I click on Michigan here, that is going to jump me to that point in my document. So if you make good use of the headings block, it will create this document outline for you automatically. And then it's really easy to work on a really long document like this. And then I'm going to show this next tool before I jump on to the next place where I'm really going to sort of show more of it. And that's this list view. So this list view shows me a representation of all of the blocks in my document. And you'll notice here up at the top, if I go back to the top of my document, that it says there's this group. And here's where I can see that there's a little caret here I can open, and that inside this group are two paragraphs. So as I start working on blocks like groups or columns, or even cover blocks that can contain what we call inner blocks, I can see that representation, that sort of tree structure in this list view. So it's a little bit easier to navigate. And as I hover over these items in the list view, you will notice that it highlights that particular item in the editing interface. So I can get a good sense if I'm looking at what I think I'm looking at here. But this list view is really kind of not that helpful to me in this document because it just says I have all these headings and paragraphs, right? That details panel was much more helpful for me to diagnose and sort of navigate this document. So I'm going to pop over to this other example here. Here, I just have a really, really long blog post. And somewhere in all of these paragraphs, I have hidden a YouTube video. If I need to go back and change that YouTube video at some point, a great use of the list view is this exact sort of purpose. So I can see I have all these paragraphs, and there's my YouTube video. So if I click YouTube here, it's going to jump me down. I actually see my friend Devin here in a video from our YouTube channel. And that lets me very quickly edit this, grab that YouTube link, maybe swap it out for a different video of Devin's and say embed, and then I can start working within my document. So between these two, this sort of details view and this list view, these two tools are really helpful for as you work on content, really being able to navigate a larger document. And they'll become really important as we start looking at full site editing. Some last concepts I want to make sure we hit before we hit full site editing itself are just block alignments. So these are really important for laying out content within my site. So right now, this YouTube video doesn't have an alignment. I haven't told it what size I want it, so it just takes up the space of my content area. I can also say that I want a wide width video, and that nicely breaks up my content so that there's almost like sort of a visual speed bump that really sort of emphasizes my video, but also shows it at a larger size so that it's not so small. I can also take this video and make it go full width. And it may not be full width in this interface here, but if I say update here and I go to my preview for this post, I should see that video down here, edge to edge in my screen. So those alignment tools are really powerful as you're designing content to get a sense of how your content will look. And then I also have this align left and align right, which almost almost creates like a sidebar within my content. And if I were to say update here and say preview and scroll down further in my document, it lets me put content sort of side by side with some paragraphs. So if it's not really important that everyone see this video, I can put it off to the side, either left or right. And you can use this alignment tool with more than just YouTube. You can use it with images. You can use it with quotes. So I could add a pull quote here and say WordPress is awesome. And I could then put that off to the side of my document. So alignments are super powerful as you are working within a document. And I would just note, because we can see it here, I have my block alignment and then I have my text alignment next to it. So I can change both of those things independent of one another. So I could get my text aligned right there, but it actually would probably look better if my text was left, but my block is aligned on the right. So that's a quick look at the block editor. There's a lot more that we could talk about, but I want to start talking about full site editing now and sort of tie these two things together. So I'm going to click view posts again, and that's going to take me back out to my WordPress dashboard. And I'm now going to go to appearance. So I'm running the 2022 theme that ships with WordPress out of the box. And WordPress has this new concept of block themes. So historically, a WordPress theme had a bunch of code files in it that only a developer who was writing HTML and JavaScript and PHP, and if those sound scary, that's because it's just not something that a general user should need to use to customize their site. So WordPress has been thinking about how do we make it easier for anyone to have that same power a developer has always had to design and lay out a site in WordPress. So I'm going to go here to the site editor, which you can find under appearance. And right now you can see that it is marked with this beta flag. It is still a new product, but it is a very stable product. And if you're saying this looks pretty familiar, this looks a lot like the interface we were just in, there are a few subtle differences between the site editor and the block editor that I get to work on my post content or my page content. The first one you'll notice is that if I click this WordPress logo, instead of taking me back to my dashboard, this actually opens up this left-hand drawer in WordPress. And it shows me that I'm working in my site editor and that I also have some templates and template parts for my theme that I can work on here. And then I have this button back to my dashboard, which if I click will take me back to my dashboard. But a few other things you'll notice are different in this site editor apart from this drawer are that in the center here, it is showing me the template that I am working on and the part areas within my template. So my site header and my site footer. So if you're trying to distinguish between the block editor where you work on posts and pages and your site editor, your block editor is going to work on all of the content in between your header and your footer. And if you had a sidebar, I don't have a sidebar on this site, this would also show as one of the areas. So the idea behind the site editor is that I can actually customize my site header and site footer all within WordPress using blocks. But I need some new blocks to do that. So I want to pull open my block inserter here for a moment and scroll back down to this theme blocks area. So some of the blocks that we need to work on our site header and footer, we're going to find in this theme blocks area. Things like my site title. I don't want to need to rewrite my site title every time I need to use it. So if I add my site title here, or if I go back up just in my current site, I should see that this in my header is my site title block. And I also have a site logo block. And I don't have a logo set for this site yet, so I can actually click here to add a site logo. We'll pretend this pineapple is my logo here for a moment. And then it's put my logo here in the document. I could even give it a nice rounded shape if I wanted to. I can pinch the size up a little bit using these draggable handles and adjust it until it looks right for my site. So these these theme blocks are really important to using full site editing. So before you get too deep into full site editing, I recommend just opening up this block inserter and just sort of take stock of what's in your menu. You have a navigation block that will allow you to make both a horizontal or a vertical menu. You have the site logo, site title, and your site tagline blocks that all pull from your WordPress settings. There's a query loop block that's a little bit more advanced, and we'll take a look at that a little bit further in. But some of these other pieces, like my post title and my post excerpt, again, will probably make a little bit more sense once we get a little further into this demo. But these theme blocks are really important to this sort of full site editing experience. So the last sort of big tip off that you are inside the site editor is this little styles icon here in the upper right. This isn't something that you'll see in the block editor. So I'm going to click that styles, and it's going to actually tell me welcome to styles. Here I can tweak my site or give it a whole new look. And it's where I can get creative about what my color palette is, what my fonts look like, and what each of my blocks look like by default out of the box. So I can set up my design. I can personalize each of my blocks, and there's some more details here. So definitely check out some of these links as you open up this styles panel for the first time. These are what are called my global styles for my site. So the first thing I wanna show off is that in WordPress 6.0, there is this new feature called theme styles. And if I come in and I say browse my styles, there is this default style. And if you've seen a WordPress site in the past year or so, you might have seen this bird and this teal color. But if this maybe doesn't quite fit my brand, but maybe this one down here does, I can swap what all of the styles in my site are to one of these presets really easily. And they each come with different colors, spacing, and fonts. And if this looks really good to me, but maybe that pink doesn't work for me, there are ways that I can sort of work around some of those design decisions in here. So I'm going to go with this Swiss for right now and use this as sort of my point that I customize from. So now that I've picked my style, I can go in and customize my typography, my colors, my layout for my entire site. And then I can also customize what my specific blocks look like. So what do I mean by that? I'm going to start here in colors. So this is the color palette that comes with my theme. And if I want to, I can say edit these colors. So maybe I already have a theme color and it's not this pink, it is sort of more of this purple color. So just using this color picker, I can pick a different color and you'll notice that this block, all of these blocks in here changed their colors to match as I made the change here. So it's pretty powerful that you can sort of very quickly customize these. Maybe I need a slightly different color here. So I can come in and customize. If you already have branding colors, either that you've picked or a designer's helped you pick, you can punch those colors in here as color codes, but you can also just use this color picker and drag it around using this slider to pick a different part of the color spectrum to choose from. So I can customize my color palette there, but then I can also customize how those apply to my site. So let's say that I want my background to be a slightly different color. I can come in here and I can either choose from another option in here. Purple on purple doesn't really look that good, but I could choose a white color. I could also come in here and say, you know what, that's just a little bit too dark. I need it a little bit lighter. And I can start playing with which color is in my background for my site here. I can also change the default color for text within my site. And so I can make it this sort of more off-white, or I'll make it a little bit more extreme so that you can see it at home, right? So as I pick one of these colors, it changes what the default is throughout my site. And I can also choose what my link color is, so I get some separation between my text and my hyperlinks. So those are my sort of global styles, and I have some similar options here for typography, where I can change my font sizes. I can change the weight of my fonts here as well. Um, but let's say that I always want my links to be purple, but I want my post title links to be a different color. Here I can open up the blocks section, and here I can apply some default styles to the blocks for my site. So I'm going to find the post title block here. That search is really handy if you have a lot of blocks installed on your site. I'm going to come to my colors, and here, because these are links, I want those links to be a slightly different color. Maybe I want those to be orange. I can swap those in, and now the rest of my links stay purple, but the links for my post title I've now customized. So it gives you really granular control over what each part of your site looks like without having to go and chase down every single setting for that block in every place you use it. So I definitely recommend spending some time looking through your styles panel anytime you work in a block theme. It's going to have a lot of really handy tools for you. And then in this layout, I can change some of the default padding and spacing on my site. And you'll see more controls come to layout over the next year or two. So that's styles. That's one part of full site editing. But now I really want to start taking a look at some of the templates in my site. Templates are super powerful. And we have our templates and our template parts. So templates, like my page template here, I'm going to open up this list view because this is going to give me a much better sense of what this block document looks like. So I see I have a header here. I have a footer if I scroll down here, down below, and then I have this group here in the center. So I'm going to open up that group, and here I can see that I have a post content block, I have a post title block, a featured image, and a separator. So maybe you like how this page displays, but you've always wanted your featured images above your titles, not below them. Well, historically, there hasn't been a way to do that without writing some code. Now, all I need to do in WordPress is come over to this post featured image block and say move up. And now all of my pages, if I were to save this template, the featured image would be on top. But maybe I want some pages where my featured image is below and some where it's above. So I can actually make multiple different kinds of page templates here. And that's where this system really starts to shine and become really powerful, is that I can create default layouts for all of my single posts, my pages, what my home page looks like, my 404 error page. I can write a fun joke on there or something. I can get a fully blank document so I can control my site completely without the default headers. But if I'm here back in my WordPress admin, I'm going to go to one of my pages and go to my About page. Oh, I actually don't have content on there. So let me find a page where I have content. How about I'll work on my privacy policy. So I will publish my privacy policy page. It's pretty standard, right? And I can see what that privacy policy looks like here. And maybe I want to make some changes to this layout. Like I want to remove this bar just on this page. What I'm going to do here is come over to my template dropdown. And here it says I'm using the default template. I have a few other choices. So I could choose that blank template I just saw. If I update my page and come back, now I don't have my site header or footer. So if you ever wanted to make a landing page, these are really, really helpful, being able to use these separate page templates. But maybe what I want to do is just use my default template, but I want to make a new template without that separation bar. So I'm going to say create new template and say Dave's cool new template for pages. You might want a shorter name than that for yours, but I'm going to say create here. And now it's going to say welcome to the template editor. And now I could come in here and remove that separator say update, and I have a new page template. So that's really where full site editing starts to really shine, is that I have access not only to design my site header and my site footer, but I can make custom templates that change how each of my posts and pages look. So if I have just sort of regularly running news updates on my blog, but once a quarter, maybe 4 times a year, I write a quarterly newsletter, I could make a special quarterly newsletter uh, template for those posts so that they're styled differently and they look different than all of the other content on my site. Excuse me one moment. So when we talk about full site editing, it's really about that ability not just to customize the top and bottom, the header and footer of your site, but also those templates. So definitely take some time and look through, and you'll see that when I created that template and I'm back in my site editor, it's now showing me that I can go back and I can edit Dave's cool new template for pages. So it's a great way to sort of tweak every aspect of your site. Maybe you want to change how your search results page looks. Maybe you want to create a new header here. So this is something that's kind of cool. If I go to the home page of my site, you'll see that I have this black big background. I have this bird graphic here, and then I have my menu. But if I go into any of my other pages, I have that same menu, but you'll notice it's now black text on white. And you might be asking, how did I do that? So here I'm going to go back into my site editor. Yeah, I'll go back to my site editor and I'll click refresh here just to make sure I'm working on something fresh. So go back into my site editor. And here I'm looking at my homepage template. And I can see here that in my header, I'm using the dark small header. And if I go to my templates again and I look at my page templates, it's not my home template. It is using a header that is just my basic header. But if I wanted to use that dark small header on all of my pages as well, I could come here and replace my header with that dark small, say save, and now when I come to my about page, I have that same treatment on my home page and I have it on my other pages. So this is really cool if maybe you have a subsection of your site, maybe you have one header that you show for all of your posts and pages, but then on your blog, you might have a separate header, because that would allow me to add a separate menu here for my blog than I have for the rest of my site. So you can really start to mix and match these parts within these templates to create really cool layouts and really unique websites without the need to have as many. Maybe in the past you needed 2 or 3 websites to put all these pieces together and have them designed and styled in this way. And now I can use one site to make all my landing pages, a custom blog section, and a custom area maybe for my shop. So that is sort of a quick crash course in full site editing. I am sure that you all have lots of questions. So I'd love to bring Devin back on so that we have 10, 15 minutes here to answer some of those questions. So thank you everyone for joining us. And yeah, Devin, let's chat a little bit more about full site editing.
All right, I'm back and I've got a lot of questions. I
All right.
didn't get to all of them, so we're going to see how many we can get through. So
All right.
first one, I'll try to go a little bit in order, but I apologize if we jump around a little bit, and we'll do our best we can if we don't get to any questions in the Q&A to respond via email to the person that asked them. We want to make sure that y'all get a lot out of this. Someone asked, if they don't see full site editing in there, how do they get access to that?
Great question. So if you don't see full site editing, we're going to go back here to my WordPress dashboard. If I switch my theme to one of these older themes that's not compatible yet with full site editing, the biggest tip off is that right below this word themes, you'll see the word customize. Until you pick a WordPress theme that is fully compatible with this system of theme blocks, you won't see this editor button here that has this beta. So that's really the only way that you can opt in, is that you do need to change your WordPress theme. I would warn you to try to do that in your Bluehost staging environment or on a test website before you go and do that. And it does mean that you might need to rebuild certain parts of your site if you were to do that. So this is best when you're starting a brand new website today, but you can upgrade an older site to use this new system as well.
So this is essentially a peek into the future, because I suspect as this becomes more and more developed, more and more themes are going to be compatible with this. Is there a way that
There
users can look at their current theme and see if it's compatible with the editor?
Yeah, so most themes will be compatible with the block editor itself. So even if you don't have full site editing to work on your headers and footers, you can still use blocks to build all of your content in any WordPress theme today. What we're talking about that only works in this new site editor are the themes where you can customize your menu using blocks as well. So using this same system, I can not only, customize the content of my site, but when I click in to this header and I look at this navigation, I can start playing with how this looks. So that's sort of the big distinction. If you are looking to build a site soon, definitely make sure you take a look for a full site editing theme, because it's going to set you up for a better future with WordPress as it continues to evolve.
Awesome. Someone asked about making adjustments to a pre-existing block, like if you have like a paragraph block, if you want to change that into a column, is there a way to do that
Mm.
without deleting the text and then converting it over?
Great question. And this is one of the tips that I didn't quite get to. So I'm glad we get to go back to it. So here I have a paragraph block, and I'm just working in my standard block editor here on some page content. When I hover over, this will tell me it's a paragraph block, but it also says change block type or style. So I'm going to click on that. And here I could change this to a heading. So if I want to sort of write a document outline and I want to say point 1, point 2, point 3, nice and quick, I can then highlight actually all 3 of those and transform all of them into headings and talk about my first point and start going deeper into that. So these transforms are like a superpower in WordPress. They really are. Like if you start writing in a paragraph and you want to transform to a button or to columns, for example. So this is another tip I'm just going to sneak in here just because I think it's really helpful and saves a lot of time. And that's when I work on columns. So here I'm going to add 3 columns equally split. And then what I'm going to do in this first column is I'm just going to set a text background and set a text color of white. And then I will come in here and add some text. And maybe I need some spacing in here, so I'll add some spacing here. But I've spent some time configuring this column now. Instead of trying to go and set all of those settings on my other columns, here's a tip. I'm going to go and delete my other columns. So I only have one. And then I'm going to take this column and duplicate it. Duplication is your best friend once you have set some settings in here. Because now, if I wanted to make this a different color, I can make this one, oh, not there. But if I go onto the column here, I can make this background orange, and I can make this background yellow. And so that way I can keep all of my settings that I painstakingly set on my column and duplicate them. And I can use that duplication not just on columns, but on any block here. And then you can take these blocks, drag them around here. You can also, if I needed to take this block at the top of my document, I can move it to the bottom here in the list view. So duplication, drag and drop, these ordering arrows, these are all your friends as you were building these documents and working on your website content. All right, let's get to some more
Awesome.
questions.
Yeah. Someone said that they are building, it sounds like a real estate agent site. And so and by the way, I might have missed this as I was trying to answer questions. We did get a lot of questions. So if you already covered this, forgive me. They asked, is there a way to create a group, like a picture with maybe a couple social links in a paragraph, and then save that as their own custom group of blocks so that they can just kind of say, hey, here's one agent, here's the next agent, here's the third agent?
Great question. So yes, there is this group block, and I said we'd get back to it. So I'm glad we are getting back to it. I'm going to remove this. One little tip as I'm working here, it says type slash to choose a block. So I'm going to type slash and type group and hit enter. And that's a quick way to get at the block you're looking for. So now I'm going to add agent name and agent description, right? But maybe I always want all of my agent to have a blue or teal color to them. By setting that color on the group, as opposed to going in and setting it on each individual block, that's one really handy thing about these group blocks is that the settings you apply carry down into the blocks they contain. And then if I need to use that for multiple agents, I can do that same duplication. And I've basically made myself a little template so I can go fill in first, last name, and Devin is now selling houses. I'll sell some houses too, right? So, again, duplication and groups there you can combine to really sort of quickly get one right just how you like it and duplicate it for others on the page.
For the demo, are you able to maybe add an image that would go with that kind of like a card, like an agent card, and maybe like a social link as well, just to see how you would do that?
Yeah, so that we're gonna get a little fancy here, but we'll
Okay.
try to do that. So I'm going to actually take this group and convert it to a, actually no, here's what I'll do. I will take the heading in this group. I'm gonna convert this to a group. So I have group in a group. I'm then going to take my paragraph and drag it inside. So I now have a group that contains my heading and paragraph. Once you've done that, you can come over here and transform this to a row. And then you can put things in that group sort of side by side. So what I can do here, I'll take that. I need those vertical, yeah. And then before this, I will add image. I'll go to my media library. We'll pretend that this is a nice headshot and bring it rounded and make it nice and small. And now if I take this group and convert it to a row, that's how you can start playing with these pieces and get them a little bit closer together. And I can play with this row's vertical alignment so that things, start to align better. And you can start to play with it and tweak it that way. But yes, so you can use rows and groups together to start aligning things. You can also use columns to do something similar. And when I collapse this down for a mobile preview, you will notice that all of these things still should play nicely with each other. So if there wasn't space, that name and agent description would tuck under the image.
Okay, and that's because you tie them together as a group, right? Because one of the other questions I have in here was, can you add blocks next to each other instead of vertically?
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about that because there's a few ways you can do it. I'm going to escape out of my preview here. Desktop, there we go. So there's a few different ways to put things side by side, right? So I can use columns to do that. So I'll get two columns and then I'll put one of my agents. This is easier to do with that list view, right? So I'll take one of these. I'll put Devin. Got to open up my columns first. So I'll put Devin in that first column. Of course, it's going to fight me. There we go. These do take a little bit of adjustment. So I've put Devin in that first column, and then I will take myself, put my header back there, and I'll put that group in below. Nope. Now I've stacked us both in the column. Hold on. No, I just didn't get in there. Okay. So this does take a little bit of adjustment, and this is something that WordPress is still working on, is this drag and drop. It is still not perfect. So if you're struggling with this, you are not the only one. You know what will probably be easier here? I'm going to use my friend duplication. Now I'm going to duplicate Devin's block. remove that, and go in and set my name there. So columns are one way that we can do this. You can also add one of those row blocks. And one of the handy things about row blocks is that, so if I have point one, and then I'll add another paragraph after that, point two, insert after point three. So when I have three columns, those three columns, they're typically equitable, right? These are 50% columns. And if I add one more, right, now I have three columns. But these are really sort of short data points. And I don't need them split equally. I need them sitting sort of side by side. Like imagine this is, a date. This is right? So we'll just say this is September 1st, and this is $2,000, and this is something else, right? So the row block lets me put those side by side without forcing them to like elastically take that 30% width. And sometimes those 30% widths can be a little complicated once you start collapsing down for mobile or other displays. So definitely check out the row block if you haven't used it. That is definitely a good friend here. And then if you go into your row block settings, you can also change how they're justified, get some of that more sort of column effect with them, but you can play with the alignments and whether you want those stacked vertically to the left or the right. So just spending some time in columns and row blocks, play with these, and you can probably get it closer to what you're looking for.
Awesome. A few more questions before we're at time. We'll see how many we can get through. And I know we're not going to get to all the questions. I will send out emails to try to follow up to make sure that everyone's questions are answered. Or maybe we'll just have Dave come back for part two, because it seems like there's definitely a lot of questions and a lot of interest on exactly how to navigate this. One of the questions, someone said that they're getting a JSON message whenever they try to insert images. They've tried iPhoto, Google Images, their desktop, and all their photos are their own. I don't know if that might be specific to their website, so that might not be the best thing to get into here, but are you familiar with that or how to resolve that, Dave?
That does sound like a bug to me. That sounds like something that shouldn't be happening. So I definitely recommend reaching out to Bluehost support, and that's something that they should be able to help you further diagnose and help you get fixed. Um, uh, just for anyone else, JSON is some of the data storage format that WordPress uses under the hood. So if you're seeing that, it's probably something that shouldn't be happening.
Okay, cool. Next question, and I appreciate the rapid fire round. You're doing great. And someone asked about Beaver Builder, and someone else also asked about Elementor and how those two different site builders interact and are different than what you went over today.
Sure. So Beaver Builder and Divi, some of Elementor, some of these builders in WordPress, they predate some of these block experiences. So they've been a way that you could use WordPress as a visual builder before this new interface came around. Now, on the bright side, all of those systems actually have their own custom blocks. So if I had Elementor or Beaver Builder in here, and I wanted to work on blocks for like my day-to-day documents, but maybe I have a really complicated layout that I either can't figure out in blocks or blocks can't quite do yet, because both of those, could be true. Then I could build it in Elementor and then drop one of those Elementor, I believe they're called part blocks, right, into my document. So you can sort of mix and match. You could do most of your site using blocks, and then do little parts in Elementor if there's something you can't quite get working using blocks. So that's one tip. And then one of the key differences here, why use this system over one of those other systems? So those products are great. Divi and Elementor will build you a really beautiful website. They're pretty easy to use. But one of the key differences is that this system is something that WordPress itself knows how to read. And so it has longevity. It will be around and working 5, 10 years down the road. And as WordPress evolves, all of your content should relatively gracefully upgrade and enhance in this system, where you might need to go back and make some tweaks using those other systems. This is also going to build you the most standards compliant website. It's actually going to be typically a little bit faster than those websites. You can build a fast website in any tool and you can build a slow website in any tool, but it's easier to build a fast website in this than it is in Elementor. And it is harder to build a fast website in Elementor than it is using this system. So whenever you're in doubt, I always recommend trying to use the core set of blocks before anything else. If you need something extra, there are some custom block suites out there that you can install. And then if you really need Elementor or Divi or one of those other tools, definitely, make use of them.
Awesome. Last question, maybe two if we can sneak it in just because we have so many.
Sure.
One, someone asked if they have a pre-existing site and they don't see this editor, is there something that they need to trigger to have this available, or does that mean that they're just on an outdated WordPress installation, and should they be concerned transferring to an editor like this that it might mess up their site?
Good questions. So WordPress has a classic editor plugin right here. This enables the previous classic experience. So the first thing to do would be to check your plugins list here in your WordPress dashboard and make sure that that classic editor isn't one of those pieces. Because you could have a fully modern, up-to-date WordPress, but have that plugin active and not see this interface. So that's the first thing. But if you don't see a WordPress 6.0.1 in the lower hand corner of your screen, that means that you're on an outdated version of WordPress. And I do strongly recommend trying to upgrade as soon as possible, just to make sure that your site stays secure and fast and all of those good things. You can enable automatic updates for WordPress if they aren't already here in your Bluehost control panel. So if you go to your Bluehost plugin in your settings, you can make sure that you always stay up to date with the latest WordPress release, and that is what we recommend. And you
Awesome.
shouldn't have too many concerns upgrading. If you have an old site, you might need to make some light design tweaks, but it should gracefully upgrade. The really big hurdle is more when you're jumping from a classic theme to a block theme. But just using the interface isn't a big jump.
And as always, whenever you're making any major changes to your website, we highly recommend taking a backup of your website just in case something goes wrong. You can always revert to that save backup and still have all of your content and all of your formatting how you had it before you tried the major update.
Definitely
Last
back up.
question.
Yes.
Yes, and I know we're at time. Is there an anchor link block, meaning if someone's doing like a recipe page where it says like jump to recipe and it jumps to a different part on the same page?
Sure. So here I'm going to have a heading. This is my anchor point. And here, these are words. And I will just duplicate that a few times, right? And if I want to make an anchor that jumps down to this point, you can do this with multiple blocks. You go to this advanced tab. Here I'm going to set an HTML anchor and call this Dave's anchor. And then I'm going to say publish. And now if I say view post, I don't know if I have quite enough content in here. I probably don't. I would need to have more content, but if I wanted to double check, we're gonna just take a quick look under the hood at all the ugliness. There is this ID here, Dave's anchor. And if I put that in my browser, right, and I say Dave's anchor, it's going to jump me to that point in the page. So you actually don't need a separate anchor block. Most blocks will let you add that anchor yourself.
Awesome. Very cool. I know we still have more questions. I'm already thinking that part two might be the easiest way to go through this, but as I mentioned before, we will send emails out and respond to everyone that had a question that has gone unanswered. Thank you so much for your participation. Dave, thank you so much for joining us. I think this is super informative. It's obviously a lot. Sometimes it feels like drinking from a fire hydrant a little bit, but as I mentioned before, we will have a recording. We'll try to send this out in the next 24 to 48 hours to get this to you so that you can kind of slow it down and digest it at whatever speed is best for you. And if the desire is there, then we'll definitely do a part two and we can go into a little bit more detail or maybe take a look at it from a different angle. So Dave, thank you again for
All right.
coming, and thank you everyone for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye.